Okay, well, let's get started. I think most of us are here. Welcome to the January 12th Plan Commission meeting. Obviously, we're doing it electronically, and I think Charity would like to say a word or two about the electronic meetings. Charity, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you for a second. I was cutting out.
We're asking you to explain the electronic meeting once again, if you would, please.
Sure. Obviously, we are having this meeting, with the, my language. In any case, Mark can cover any of the legalese that we need to cover since he's here. I'll leave that to him. But just remember, please, if you're not speaking, to mute yourself and to refrain from using the chat feature. And I will let Mark say anything else we need to say about having the meeting remotely.
The only other thing to mention, thank you, Charity, is that under the circumstances and the governor's new and revised rules and declarations, and the determination of the head of this plan commission that it's not practical or appropriate to hold in-person meeting, and therefore this meeting is being held virtually.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Charity. I guess I'd like to call this meeting to order. Can we have a attendance roll call, please?
Sure. Egan?
Here.
Hoffenberg?
Here.
Mosier?
Here.
O'Connor?
Here.
Wentink?
Here.
Schwartz?
Here.
And Pace.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, great. I trust you all have read the minutes of the last meetings. Are there any corrections, clarifications that are required? Having seen none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Dave Schwartz, so moved.
Second? Anyone? Second. And with me, compliment you for announcing it. Yes.
Each person who speaks, whether to make a motion or to make a second, needs to say your name.
Okay.
So person who seconded needs to be the one to say his name out loud.
I think we're going to let Glenn.
Glenn Wentink, second.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Great. All in favor?
No, it has to be a roll call with a call of every person's name because of this is virtual meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mark. Peggy, can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Schwartz?
Yes.
Wentink?
Aye.
O'Connor?
Aye.
Mosier?
Aye.
Hoffenberg?
Aye.
Egan?
Aye.
And Pace.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Okay, great. Tonight we have two cases. We first have the Resubdivision case, and then we have cases revolving text amendments to the code. I'd like for anyone who plans on speaking this evening, excuse me, something's happening here. Anyone who plans on speaking this evening, they would need to take the oath if they're going to give testimony. And I see Mr. McNelie is here. Is there anyone else who's here that would have to take the oath? Okay, Mr. McNelie, do you plan to speak during the presentation? Tom McNelie, can you hear me?
Hey, Tom, you're muted. Tom, can you hear us?
Anyone? Heather, got an idea?
Yeah, give me a second. I'm going to try to call him really quick. I think based on the little symbol on his picture, I don't think that he has his audio on.
Okay.
Let me try to give him a call real quick.
Okay. Mark, you're also muted. Could you?
I was going to suggest that you can move forward with the meeting and come back to him if you wish.
Mark, the text amendments are lengthy, I don't know that we want to move forward into that agenda item.
Change it to rather than back discussion of this item.
Sure.
Is that agreed, Charity? Okay. And in that case, let me, should we open the meeting then without Tom? You ready? Okay. So while Tom gets ready, I guess I would like to motion to open the meeting. And the first agenda item is PC case 258 about the 215 South Brainard Avenue Resubdivision. And when we get Tom McNelie there, he'll present something on that. In the meantime, if we can get staff to give a brief presentation on the Resubdivision.
You bet. I'm just pulling it up because Heather has it on her screen. So give me just 1 second and we can get it up.
Okay, Tom now should be on, so if he can just unmute himself, I think he should be good. So Tom, the controls are at the bottom to unmute yourself, the little mic.
There you go. Tom, you with us?
Thirty, do you want to see if you can unmute him?
It says that he's unmuted him. Now
It seems to be going back and forth.
Heather, you could have him call your desk phone and put him on speaker.
Okay, how about in the meantime, Charity, you prepared then to give a yeah?
I'll jump into a presentation here so we can keep things moving.
Sounds good, thank you.
Sure.
Charity, real quick, do we need a motion to open the public hearing at all?
It's a re-subdivision, so it's not a public hearing.
Okay.
Legally. Here we go. All right.
That's correct.
Okay. Give me just 1 second. I need to share my screen.
Yeah. 3173122, and then put in the code 377561. Is that just for audio, or is that the?
Okay, let's see here.
Or is that just?
Can you all see my screen now?
I can. Yes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so this is case 258, 215 South Brainard Avenue. And I'm going to just mute Tom real quick so we don't hear his and Heather's conversation.
So Tom's going to call in on his phone, so he'll be in a second. I can go ahead and get started while Tom's calling in, and then we can go from there. Does that work?
That's great, Heather.
Okay, perfect. So, and then Charity, I'll just have you advance the slides. So Tom McNelie, who we all know is having just a little bit of technical issues, is the contract purchaser of the subject property on Brainard. He is looking to re-subdivide the property into 2 lots. He is not seeking any variation from the zoning code. So the subject property is currently zoned R4, which is a single-family residential district. It requires a minimum lot width of 50 feet and a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet. And Charity, if you want to go ahead and advance. The applicant is proposing that the current lot, which is actually made up of pieces of older lots, be re-subdivided into 250 wide lots, so meeting the minimum width requirement. And then it will have and then the total lot areas will be 6,778 square feet, so over that minimum 6,000 square feet. The intent for the property is to demolish the single-family home that sits across the 3 lots, re-subdivide them, of course, into the 2, and then build 2 new single-family homes. So all the improvements that are currently on the property would be demolished. So as you all are really familiar now, the Grange Code of Ordinances requires that public land be dedicated when new building sites are created as part of a final plat such as this one. So the code requires, as I apologize, I've said a couple times, you've heard before, that when there are 75 building sites created, 1 acre of land must be dedicated. So clearly we have far less than 75 here. So it's just a fraction of an acre that would need to be dedicated. However, the code states that when calculated, if the area for dedication is less than that acre, a recommendation can be made to the village board from the Plan Commission to waive the requirement. So based on just the two proposed lots that would be generated, this would require just over a 1,300 square foot dedication. However, the current lots are accessed by South Brainard Avenue, which is a standard 66-foot right-of-way. And additionally, the applicant is proposing in the rear of the property, if Charity, you wouldn't mind kind of highlighting with your mouse, he'll be dedicating a 5-foot easement along the back of the lot for public use. So the village's consulting engineer, Baxter and Woodman, reviewed the proposed plat and commented that the plat meets all plating requirements and no changes are needed at this time. So if after review and deliberation, the Plan Commission determines that the plat of Resubdivision meets the requirements for platting and it should be recommended to the village board for approval, staff is suggesting one comment listed on the last page of the staff report, that the land dedication requirement be waived as no additional right-of-way is required along the east side of Brainard Avenue. I can take any questions the commission has at this time, or if Greg wants to go ahead and swear in Tom, he should have audio at this point.
Yes, I do.
Okay, Tom. Well, first of all, Tom, would you like to, let me swear you in real quick and then this thing, no time. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true as far as you?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. So, would you, first we're going to ask a couple questions of staff, Tom, and then some of the commissioners may ask you a couple of questions for clarification. So,
Okay.
I think I'm open to any commissioner now. Is there any questions, concerns about the PC 258? Hearing none.
There is this is Peter O'Connor. Just a quick question on, just curious more than anything. Just how did it come to pass that there's 3 PIN numbers? Just didn't get a sense for the history there.
I don't know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, as kind of detailed in the staff report, these lots were part of a much larger subdivision that spans from Cottage 47th and then, of course, a couple of streets east and west. It was a plat from a very long time ago. It was 1895 when it was originally platted. And over time, a lot of the lots in this one particular block of the subdivision have kind of chopped up and been reconsolidated. From what I can tell in the Cook County records, the lots seen under these 3 PIN numbers in these kind of 3 separate, parcels, 3 separate lots, has been this way since at least the 60s when the current owners purchased the property. So it's been like this for quite some time, but the original lots were 50. You can kind of see that with lot 18 in the middle. If Charity wouldn't mind flipping back just one slide. On the plot of survey, you can see lot 18 in the middle there. That one's a 50-wide lot. So what happened at some point was whoever owned 18 bought the south 32 feet of 19, and then also bought the north 18 feet of 17. And it's been like this, like I said, from at least the 60s, from what I can tell. So although it's kind of a chopped up piece, it actually would have been 2 lots under the original subdivision because the original lots were 50 feet wide.
Got it. And those 2 smaller parcels were added at the same time or separately?
From my understanding, it's been in this configuration since the current owners purchased it in the 60s. So it had to have happened prior to the 60s, and with Cook County offices being closed, we have no way to go downtown and determine when the actual separation was. What I can also tell you is north of here, Elm Park, that was re-subdivided at some point, actually after these lots were already chopped, which were a part of the original larger subdivision. So there's been a lot of, kind of chopping up of lots and reconsolidating and putting things under new pins in the subdivision for quite some time.
Got it. That's very helpful. Thank you, Heather.
This is Glenn Wenting. Can I ask?
Sure, go ahead, Glenn.
I see that we're getting a 5-foot easement. I'm kind of surprised that that didn't exist already. Are the other lots on that particular stack, do they all have easements now, or is this something that the village has requested of the property?
So a lot of the lots in Grange don't have a dedicated easement in the rear. A lot of the plats were done a very long time ago before that was really contemplated. As our standard platting policy now, we do require when new lots are created that we get an easement in the rear of the property. So that's why you're seeing it now. But no, you're correct. The other lots on there don't necessarily have an easement on them.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the commissioners? The commissioners have any questions for Mr. McNelie? Okay, great. So I guess we're going on to, I guess I have to ask Heather quickly, were there any comments from any outsiders that were emailed to you that you need to share with us in this case?
Not related to this case, no.
Okay, great. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I guess we can look for, this never really was an open meeting, so we don't need a motion to close the meeting. So, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, is that right?
That's right. You can move straight to someone making a motion on the matter if you choose.
Okay, thank you. I trust you've all read the summary conclusion that staff has prepared, and also a brief suggestion that we waive the land dedication. I guess even though they are giving the easement, it's probably not the square foot that usually goes with the land dedication. So, the commissioners, does anyone have any comments, or if there are no comments, if someone would like to make a motion based on thoughts of this case? Now that you've had a chance to reread the conclusion, would anyone like to step up here?
Just to help along, the motion could be something, a motion to recommend approval of the subdivision as presented and a waiver of the land dedication element. Now someone, if you wanted to, could say your name and say so moved.
Julie Egan, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Egan. Is there a second?
Peter O'Connor. Second.
Go ahead. Okay, that was Commissioner O'Connor. Any further discussion? No, I guess since this is a Zoom meeting, we need a roll call vote on this. Ms. Helper, can you just roll call vote, please?
Sure. Egan?
Aye.
O'Connor?
Aye.
Hoffenberg?
Aye.
Mosier?
Aye.
Wentink?
Aye.
Schwartz?
Aye.
And Pace.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. McNulty. I think staff may need to meet with you at some point in time. Heather, you have anything to say?
Tom, I'll give you a call tomorrow about the next village board meeting it would be on, which is likely the February 8th in theory, but we just need to talk about the Mylar and signatures.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Mr. McNulty.
Thank you very much.
There's just one.
Okay. Great. Let's move on to Plan Commission Case 259, the text amendments. Articles 3 through 9, 14 and 16 of the Grange zoning code. Daph, would you like to give us a little presentation?
Absolutely. Bear with me just one sec.
Okay.
All right. So I apologize for the technical errors earlier, but we're rolling along now. So as you saw in the staff report, it's that time of year again. It's text amendment time. I know everyone's favorite meeting. So I did change up the order just a little bit. So if you don't mind following along with me, we're actually going to go ahead and start with the administrative adjustment fee. So as you saw in the staff report, this fee is actually in our code, and there have been some changes with how Cook County charges for things to be recorded. So in response to that, we do need to up the cost of this application to recoup those costs. So we're simply proposing that the cost of the application be increased from $100 to $250. Is there any questions on this one?
So is it possible to change the fee to just pass through the recording charges to the applicant once, perhaps it's closer to knowing what's been approved and what needs to be recorded, so that you're not having to potentially suffer a loss or even get close to a loss? So that, for instance, if you know what the administrative fee is that you want to charge to recoup some type of a fee in favor of the village, and on top of that, perhaps recoup costs, right? So is it possible to bifurcate it to say, we're going to charge you $100 plus whatever the recording charges are?
So how we currently charge fees for the entitlement cases that you see, like special uses and plan development, is similar. We ask for an escrow, and then they are still required to pay all costs related to the application. The administrative adjustment process is so truncated that, and the fees are set by Cook County are actually in a fee schedule that changes relatively infrequently. It actually hasn't changed in a number of years. So the moral of the story is that usually we try to make whatever the escrow is somewhat relevant to the average cost of the application to go through the process. So even if we did change this to maybe be a recoup, I would still be recommending that we take in at least the $250 because that would at a minimum cover the cost for us to mail the letters, staff time to process all their applications and go through that process, and then also takes in the extra money for it to be recorded. Also, from just a history standpoint, generally when people are applying for an administrative adjustment, they're reaching out to staff first to get information on the best possible crafted application, and so the actual number of these that have been turned down has been relatively low because at the onset they're aware of kind of what a successful application looks like, and that informs them what is to apply or not.
Right. And the only reason I ask that is because working in that industry, if you will, myself, there's been rumblings that Cook County is going to revisit the recording platform and charges, given the massive change that's happened over the last 6 months for the increase in people wanting to submit electronic recording and them having to update their platform entirely. So I just was curious if there's a way to anticipate a potential another change that might be coming from Cook County in the next year. It might not happen, it might. I was just trying to anticipate having to do this twice, if we will, in less than a year. Just so that the village is going to, be made whole, if you will, and not have to eat a loss.
Yeah, that's interesting, Jeff. That's maybe some information that we weren't privy to. As Heather mentioned, our experience has been that Cook County hasn't changed these very frequently. So if that seems like it may be something.
There's been a lot of complaints right now because, for instance, I just had to try to get an easement recorded with the Cook County Recorder of Deeds, which is now the clerk's office because we consolidated the offices. They're running 5 weeks behind. And there's been a significant amount of complaints that have come in from the what I'll call the real estate world, if you will, that's been levied with Cook County, that they're not prepared and they're not able to handle what's happened in the change in the new world, if you will, of electronic recording. So this might never happen, who knows, but there has been talk about them revisiting whether or not they need to upgrade their entire platform to more easily and efficiently accommodate electronic recordings. Like I said, it might never happen because it is Cook County, but I only raised it because if we're going to do this right now and then all of a sudden they add an extra $50 again, 7 months from now, do we have to revisit this and increase the charge from $250 to $300? So that's why I asked.
Sure.
So the other thing that's just slightly unusual about having the fee amount, such as a flat fee amount, such as this in the code, is that generally things like this would be in our fee schedule. It's a little unique that it's actually in our zoning code. So when we take a look at revamping the entire fee schedule, I think we can also look at maybe updating this to be a little bit more flexible. And in saying, just see the fee schedule as opposed to just having it in code so every time Cook County changes, up or down, that we can adjust more easily without needing to bring it back to too. So we plan on looking at that fee schedule. I believe, Charity, correct me if I'm wrong, in the next year, because we're changing some of our fees related to our permitting. So it might be an opportune moment. But in the meantime, we still would need to change it now to recoup any costs that come in before that time.
I've got a technical question, Attorney Berglund. As we're working through these, are we going to need to vote on each of these text amendments separately? I hate to, no? You want to wait till the end, or?
It really is any option you want to take. We certainly do not have to move one amendment or another. If there is a particular concern about one, a commissioner can raise it. But if there are not, you can just move forward and collect them and put them under one broad motion.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
So then, commissioners, in light of what Commissioner Hockenberg said, and the way this amendment reads now, in general, I think the adjustment is good now, or I think we should revamp that. There's a bunch of other lawyers out there, I know.
Yeah, based on what Heather just alluded to, I would say this is sufficient, and then, we can just keep our eye on it. I'm sure Charity and Heather will as well, and Mark will. And if Cook County increases their recording fees, I think we'll just have to revisit it at that time just to make sure that the city is not getting harmed or suffering a loss for recordings. I would support it.
Okay, sound good, Dave? Did you have something?
Nope, I was just going to say the exact same thing. I agree.
Okay, sounds good. So at this point, I'm just going to mark this one as, proposed as is, and when we come down to the motions, it'll be pretty much as it's written right now. So let's move on. I guess I know we've switched the order. Charity, what was your next favorite? Is it trellises? Or are we talking wireless stuff or solar things?
We're going to talk wireless next. I know we're a little bit out of order, but we're sort of trying to go from most mundane to most maybe of interest to the Plan Commission for more deliberation. So as you saw in your staff memo, recently the Village Board adopted regulations in Chapter 102 of the Code of Ordinances related to small wireless facilities, which are regulated by the Small Wireless Facility Deployment Act. Our ability to regulate small wireless facilities is regulated by the state Small Wireless Facility Deployment Act. And so we recently updated those requirements in the Code of Ordinances. Separately, in the zoning code, we have regulations for personal wireless services. So I wanted to just briefly show you a couple examples of some of the terminology, and then we can talk briefly about the changes, and I can answer any questions that you might have related to the proposed zoning code amendments. So personal wireless services, on your screen, there's examples. It's on the left is a monopole tower. In the middle is a latticework tower, and on the right is a latticework tower on top of a building. So really the traditional cellular facilities, this is what we're talking about with personal wireless services. Heather, if you want to go to the next slide. Small wireless facilities, by contrast, are very small antenna that go on utility poles that would go in the right-of-way. So this kind of shows you a few different examples of how those can get mounted. And then the next slide, Heather, shows an illustration of the difference between a large monopole or a latticework tower and a small wireless facility. So small wireless facilities, again, are not regulated by the zoning code. They're regulated by Chapter 102 of the Code of Ordinances. So we had to go through in these amendments and make several clarifications just to make that clear, because at the time that the zoning code was written, small wireless facilities weren't a thing yet. Heather, the next slide. Can you go to the next slide, Heather? There we go. Also, in the zoning code, we regulate just antennas generally. So satellite dishes, an HDTV antenna, or an amateur ham radio antenna. So we also made some updates to that. Heather, if you want to go to attachment 2 to the report, I can walk briefly through this table, which outlines all of the changes that we're making related to personal wireless services, references to small wireless facilities, and then other antennas as well. And Mark, if at any time you want to jump in and add anything, please feel free.
Thank you, I will.
So as Heather's scrolling, a lot of the changes, as we mentioned, are really just to add references. So, and to make some things more clear than they already were in the code. So you'll see one of the first changes is in the single-family districts, we're making it clear that when we're talking about general antennas, that's not antennas for commercial uses in single-family residential districts, and it's not including small wireless facilities. So you see those kinds of things over and over again. The next thing is a cross-reference. And then really this third piece where you see all the strike-through in the multifamily districts. Currently in the multifamily districts, we allow personal wireless services, so those cellular antennas, with certain conditions in the R8 only south of 47th Street. We did research. We could find no permit history of any existing facilities. We actually did a visual inspection and could find no existing facilities mounted to any buildings in the R8 south of 47th Street. So we're proposing to strike this as a use in the R8 multifamily district. So personal wireless services antennas would not be allowed anymore in the R8 as proposed in the draft here.
Just a quick question. How is this one identified? So if nobody has it, I mean, not that I'm not fine with the deletion, but I was just curious, was this raised by anything, or is it just part of a general review of antennas?
So we noticed this as part of this comprehensive review of all of our regulations related to personal wireless services and antennas. When we did some research into the background, the only thing that I can figure, there's a small area that is south of 47th Street in Grange that is zoned R8. There's not that much. It's like the Banyan Cove, or not Banyan Cove. Yeah, Banyan Cove area. Villa Venice, thank you, that's it. I get the names mixed up. It's the Villa Venice area. There is a cell tower across the village line in Countryside. And I think my speculation is that perhaps at the time that cell tower had not been sited, and so maybe there was an interest by Villa Venice to have that tower on their building as a revenue stream. But that's all speculation on my part. We really don't have any records that say why it was written this way. It just was. You know, maybe it was a dead spot for cell service at the time. I don't know.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Jeremy.
If there aren't other questions, I'm just going to cruise along to the next thing. So the next two pieces are just some cross-references, updating cross-references in the code. The next substantive changes in the commercial districts. Currently in the C1, we allow for personal wireless services as a permitted use with conditions. It has to be mounted to a building and a series of other considerations. We're proposing to change that from a permitted use to a special use. We felt it appropriate given the aesthetic considerations and height and everything else related to antenna personal wireless services that it go through that discretionary review process. So we're proposing to change that from a permitted use to a special use. Any questions on that?
And maybe you said this, but would this impact any current structure? Are these, in locations now, or?
I'm not aware of any personal wireless services antenna in the C1 now.
Again, this is just the personal. This is not the larger towers, right?
So this is a personal wireless services antenna. So this would be like an AT&T antenna or a T-Mobile antenna, but it would be, according to the provisions that we have already in our code and we're keeping, it has to be, when they are fully enclosed in a structure otherwise permitted on the zoning lot. And such antenna, support structure, and equipment shall fully comply with all the requirements applicable to, without limitations, including Section 9106, which is where we have all of our standards for personal wireless services. So that regulates things like color, screening, and other stuff like that. But
size and height.
And personal wireless services are a permitted use in the I-1 district. So we have existing monopole and lattice work towers in the village. They're in our industrial district. And that's where we would intend that they would continue to be. We just further felt it was appropriate to change this limited allowance from a permitted use to a special use.
Because when you showed the picture, it made sense. But when I was trying to read the text, I didn't see like the size restriction. It makes sense when you show me the picture of the distinguishing between the big, huge poles that we're all used to seeing and these smaller. Now what I understand, because you see them when you see, and the picture helped. Those things that are mounted usually on light poles or side of buildings, but is there on these SWFs? Is there size restrictions and whatnot?
For the SWFs that are regulated by 102, yes, they're regulated in 102, and then by the FCC and the state Small Wireless Facilities Deployment Act is based on the size of the antenna. So antennas over a certain size are not an SWF by definition. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because it talks about this section would only govern in the event of the conflict between this and the Illinois and federal laws. So I'm assuming that that's where these otherwise contain those limitations, restrictions, and everything else.
There are other factors that distinguish a small wireless facility from the antennas that we're talking about in the zoning code. You've hit on a couple of them, but there are others, bandwidth and other elements as well. What we've tried to do is separate those, as Charity has said, and one way to do that is we have a provision in the zoning code now that disavows any reference in the zoning code to small wireless facilities. All small wireless facilities are governed by Chapter 102 of the Code of Ordinances, as well as other things, including the design guidelines that the Board of Trustees has enacted.
Okay, anything else on that one before we move on? Okay. So, moving on again, we're really just making some updates to some cross references. We previously only had a maximum. We found as we were doing our review that there was a little bit of a loophole in the code currently for these other antennas, things like satellite dishes on people's houses, their TV antenna, that sort of thing. If the antenna had a surface area of less than 10 square feet, there technically wasn't a maximum height set on those. So, but we had one for larger antennas in the code. So you'll see a few updates here on these pages where we are just making it clear that the height limitation that exists in 9101 of the code applies to all of these other antennas, regardless of size. So that's what these changes are. And again, just the rest of these are just updating those cross references again. You want to keep scrolling, Heather? All right, and then artery uses and structures. We're again just making it clear that small wireless facilities are not accessory uses or structures under this code and aren't authorized by the zoning code. Those are addressed by Chapter 102. The next one, Article 9, accessory uses and structures. This is talking about antennas other than ham radio antennas, which have their own separate set of regulations and provisions for the FCC. But other antennas, we're making it clear that these are accessory uses. They're accessory to the principal use on the property. They're not, they're not for someone to just rent out space on the top of their building and then make money by having, T-Mobile have an antenna on top of the building or anything like that. So again, just making it very clear what the intent of the code regulations are. And then making it clear, closing that loophole that small antennas are subject to the same height limits as larger antennas. Next page, Heather. Same kind of language here. And then we get to amateur radio facilities. We previously had different regulations for amateur radio facilities that were larger than 10 square feet. We just struck all of that reference to size, and these are just the regulations for amateur radio facilities, which is ham radio, which you don't see as much of. Okay. Keep going, Heather. All right, and then this to the end here, we just have, again, a reference making it clear that personal wireless services does not include small wireless facilities. And then the definitions, we've updated the definitions, again, to include all of those cross-references to small wireless facilities in Chapter 102.
This is probably the key element when someone comes to the village and expects something that they can't have. The changes or upgrades of these definitions are the backstop of those kinds of issues.
The Charity, I see that is the last page of the personal wireless documentation.
Yes. Unless there's other questions on that topic, that concludes my presentation for the personal wireless services and other antennas.
And so, just to be clear, it doesn't sound like it, but these changes, if they were in place previously, they wouldn't necessarily impact any use that we're aware of now. This is really just forward-looking, not that there are particular issues being addressed currently on a property.
If, for example, there were an existing personal wireless services antenna on a building in a C1 district that we're unaware of right now, it would just become non-conforming, which it could continue to be there forever. They could maintain it. It's just if the new one wanted to go there or they wanted to take it away and then replace it entirely, it would have to follow the new protocols and it would have to get a special use.
Okay.
Commissioners, any other comments on the personal wireless devices? Okay. Okay, so unless you're indicating that you want some kind of specific changes, I'm going to mark this down as pretty much, when we vote for the motion, I'm going to mark this down as pretty much pending as is, unless anyone has some right now they need to change. Okay, Charity, then what would be the next up the man?
All right, so our next one is going to be Trellises and Arbors. So just like we did with the wireless items, we were just going to try differences between arbor and trellis based on our code. So on the left, that is arbor based on our code. Could be curved, could be flat, and then a trellis that you would see on the right. So as you saw in the staff report, we did have a request come up where somebody wanted to use a number of trellises placed basically directly next to one another. And the zoning code doesn't specifically say that there is a minimum separation between the trellises that is required. All it says is that when it's in the front yard, there's a maximum horizontal length of 6 feet. It does not say that it can't then be placed directly next to another 6-foot horizontal item. So what you see on the screen is pretty close to what was being requested because the homeowner was indicating that since there isn't a minimum spacing requirement that he could place them there. The ZBA did review it and did not agree with that assertion, but did indicate that it would be helpful both for them and for staff to have it clarified how much space should be between them. This is the actual example of what was provided, so just to kind of give you an idea. So what staff is just proposing to do is just to clarify that there is a minimum separation required between these trellises, because as you saw before, placing them directly next to each other starts to really kind of wade into the gray area of maybe being a fence. So to make sure that these two, it's clear that trellises and arbors are different from a fence or other accessory structures, we're proposing to indicate that there needs to be at least a 6-foot separation between these items.
Heather,
So what that would mean would be there could be a 6-foot trellis, but then there would be a 6-foot space before you could put another one. So.
Can I ask Heather, on the two pictures that you had, where were those trellises relative to their property or property lines?
So the actual proximity of the trellis to the property line was compliant. So the trellis in the front or corner side yard, it's the same restrictions, that 6-foot requirement, and it's a minimum requirement that it be at least 5 feet from the front or corner side property line. So it was compliant in that respect, and it was compliant that, in general, the trellis can be in the front yard. It was not compliant with respect to the length of it. And then, of course, like I said, there's no separation requirement. So what he was really arguing was each panel was less than 6 feet. So therefore, he met the requirement, which is not what the ZBA nor staff really was behind. So.
But if I wanted to encircle a patio within my own backyard with trellises all around it, that's fine, I assume.
Right. This
Right.
regulation only applies in the front and corner side yard.
Commissioners, questions, comments, concerns?
Sorry.
This is Susie Mosier. I think it's a great amendment to clarify exactly the intent. I think the added language makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Anyone have any disagreements? I'm just going to mark this one probably proposed as is, and I guess we can go on if there's no other questions.
All right, so our next one's related to solar energy systems. So the village underwent an initiative to be certified through SolSmart, and through that initiative, we were working to reduce barriers for solar panel installation. Additionally, the village hadn't seen a lot of solar panel installations prior to about 2018. There was about 3. But since then, we've had a significant number of permits. We went from having just 3 to now, since 2018, having a completely new 31, and just 2020 alone, we were doing 13. So we've seen an increase in solar panel installation, which is great, but we've also kind of learned that the code that was implemented prior maybe, again, has some gray to it that needs to be a bit clarified. So on the screen is what you see on the screen is what we believe was intended, that they were supposed to be installations, that aren't highly visible, but still give people the ability to have solar installations that meet their needs for their home. From our understanding, the intent was to avoid things like this. And I apologize, this wasn't my best picture skills, but as you can see here, there is a solar panel that is mounted at a 90-degree angle on the top of this home, which is not in LaGrange. To be clear, it is not in LaGrange. But again, the intent, our belief is the intent was supposed to allow the picture on the right, not the picture on the left. So,
is there an interpretation that would allow that picture on the right currently?
No, there is not.
Okay.
There is not.
And I'm assuming that's the requirement of may not exceed more than 6 inches above the roof to which it's attached.
Correct. So I'm going to just skip the amendments real quick and just go straight to this picture. So the intent is twofold. It's one, to kind of expand the ability of folks to have solar panels on their roof, and this in two forms. One, to account for some folks that have flat roofs, and then a second, to just address that some roofs have multiple peaks as well. So what you see on the screen is an example of a permit we received that was not approved as you've seen it. This is just for discussion purposes. Basically, as you can see, this home has some areas that are flat roof, and certain areas are higher than others. So as you can see here, this is the tallest point of this roof. This is a lower section of roof that is a flat roof. And then also, as you can see from the aerial over here, there's some tree coverage as well to kind of play into this as well, which there are in a lot of lots. So the intent from our proposed code changes is that a lower roof like this would still be able to have a panel put on it, but exceed the height, but not more than 6 inches. But the tallest point of the roof here, where it could be potentially most visible, panels could not exceed the top of this ridge. So no panels could be placed here, but panels could be placed on this lower roof. So again, it's conveying to folks that you can have these panels. They do need to be, not very visible. We're controlling that through height, and we're allowing for, certain areas on multiple peaks to have more area for these solar panels, but we're not allowing the tallest areas to then be exceeded. Again, to kind of avoid that example that you saw with the panels kind of sticking straight up.
If someone were to add boards up on the top of the highest flat roof to include the view or 6 inches above the solar panels, would that cause a problem?
So you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that you might be in favor of allowing people to put them here but still control them to the 6 inches?
No, I'm just thinking of someone just trying to take what we're proposing and then, mess with it by just adding a little bit of facial boards up on top of their roof, just so that the solar panels are still there, but you can't see them. Almost increasing the size of your top roof.
Yeah, I apologize. I probably should have Mike here to answer that question. I think there would be some concerns about load bearing on that with the panels, and also with how your roof is configured. I don't know that I see people trying to change the pitch of their roof to add the solar panels. The reason I think we've seen so many since 2018 is because there's certain tax credits that make them very affordable for folks, and so the actual installation of them is relatively inexpensive as compared to what they could be because of these tax credits. So I'm just not sure that from a cost perspective it would be feasible for someone to try and raise the height of their roof. Regardless, though, in the residential districts, the maximum height of a roof, so that's from grade to the peak, can't exceed 38 feet, and then height, which is measured a little bit differently, is 35. So in theory, even if they're trying to raise the roof a little bit to maybe get some other section to then be shorter, and then use the 6 inches, they're likely not going to be outside of our requirements to begin with, because they're restricted by that 38 to their peak of their roof.
Okay. And that one, the one in the middle in this example is flat, right?
It is flat, yes, and is the tallest point. Yep.
So even the tallest point, but if it was a pitched roof, somebody could still put solar panels on that portion of the roof, but it would not be able to. So it would be you'd have to go 6 inches below the lowest peak, so that if you put it on 6 inches above, you'd have to be either flush with or below the top peak of the roof.
Correct. Yep, that's exactly the intent.
Okay. And I appreciate appreciate that you incorporated into this meeting raise the roof.
I think Greg might get a gold star for that, you guys. So the second part of this amendment is that we also want to expand the ability for folks to put solar panels on accessory buildings as well. We have gotten a number of requests to put them on detached garages, no sheds, but detached garages. And the way that it's written in the code is that it's only supposed to be in a single-family residence, which is a term that's not actually defined in the zoning code. A single-family dwelling is defined, but a single-family residence is not. So again, just a little bit of gray, although, based on how it was enforced before, it's clear that it was supposed to really be on single-family homes. So, but since we've been getting these requests, since people have trees or other things that kind of block their ability to put solar panels, and we restrict them from being visible from the front lot line, if it is not the south-facing line, we're hoping to allow a little bit more ability for people to put these panels on and get the energy uses that they need from it. So the second part of this would be to allow these panels on accessory buildings, whether it be sheds or detached garages, and then adhering them to the same 6-inch requirement and the same maximum height requirement. The only difference would be, since generally detached garages and sheds are located in the rear 30 feet of the building, we would allow them to face the front lot line. They'd be so far back in the lot you wouldn't really be able to see them anyways, but technically they would still face it. So we would be exempting them from that only when they're located in the rear 30 feet of the lot.
Discussions, questions, concerns? Anyone?
I had one. I actually have a friend of mine that's in this industry, so he sent me a proposal for my house just because I was curious the cost, and I didn't do it. Of course, I'm interested, but just doesn't seem feasible right now. But the one thing that he did when he sent me a proposal was the majority, I would say about 60 to 70% of the panels that he was showing on my house would be on the south facing. But he had a significant number of them on the west because, the way that the sun shifts in for my house in particular, there was a good amount of time during the day that west facing roof would get a lot of sun and capture the power. So I guess I'm just asking the question, is there a reason we would limit the front line restriction exception to only south as opposed to west for people that are along Brainard or anybody else that's got a west facing front line that might want to take advantage of this?
So most of the lots in Grange are an east to west lot, which means that most people's front lines are you're running into an east or a west. So that's, I think, really the intent, and they were also just trying to allow for those who have the south-facing lot line or our corners to still have the ability to put their panels there, which would still garner them the most amount of sunlight. So I haven't had anyone really raise too many issues related to the west side. It's really just been the south side.
So would that mean that somebody could do a west? I just want to make sure I understand. So you got a front line that was west facing. You would be allowed to put it on the front facing the street, or no?
No, you would not. And that's because, like I said, most of the lots are east-west facing. So the intent is to prevent them from being visible from the street. So just by the way that the lots are already configured, it's not really feasible for a lot of people to use them on that side.
But anybody that's got a house that's south facing, you are allowing it.
Right. So the way that the code was written was to allow it. So I think the policy consideration was, in general, the village didn't necessarily, at the time, this is all obviously open for discussion. At the time, it didn't want to allow solar panels. I'm hearing music. Is somebody? I'm sorry. Thanks, Dave. At the time, they didn't want to necessarily allow a lot of solar panels to be on the street facing facade of the building, of the single-family homes. But the southern elevation is the one that gets the most energy from solar panels. So there was an exception made if it was the southern elevation that was the front-facing elevation.
Understood.
I think that's written the way it is.
And I don't know the answer to this because I don't know enough about this to talk that intelligently about this. I'm just saying, based on the proposal that I saw and the question that I asked my buddy that did this, he said that a lot of times when they send these proposals, they do both south-facing and west-facing to maximize, the optimal energy capture from the sun, if you will, based on the way that obviously all of us usually get a little bit of a lot of south and quite a bit of west. So I guess I'm raising the question: do people think that's enough of an issue that we want to just address that now, if we're addressing it at all? So.
Well, and I think aesthetically, that would mean that there could potentially be a lot more front-facing solar panels on homes, because we have a lot more homes that face west than we have homes that face south. So.
Right. And I guess from an equity standpoint, is it, somebody that's got a south-facing home that would be entitled to take advantage of this versus somebody that's got a west-facing home that wouldn't? Is that enough of an issue that we think is that enough of an issue that people think is problematic? I guess I'm not swayed either way. I guess I'll throw it out there for if anybody feels strongly enough.
Well, really quick, from my experience with permitting, we don't get a lot of complaints about the west. Like I said, it's mostly people asking for the south. So from a permitting perspective, I don't know that that's so much being asked for. But can I ask, Jeff, the west lot line for you, is that your front or is that your rear?
For me, that's the rear. So it wouldn't be for me, but if I had a west-facing, my house faces east, so I get to be, I guess, lucky that I'm on the other side of the street, right? In that regard. But if I was literally on the other side of the street, I wouldn't be able to take advantage of that. So, and when I get the proposal that you showed me, it was the difference between probably making it financially feasible or not feasible, if I was able to put it on the west side or not. If I was prohibited from doing the west side, it would never have worked. It wouldn't have worked financially to do it.
So this actually is one of the reasons, too, that we're trying to allow it on the accessory buildings as well. Because then that is, you did face, so if your front line was west and it was, the difference between the number of panels on the home and then a number of the panels on the home and the garage, then because you would be putting them on the garage, that can face that way because it's in the rear 30 feet of the lot. So there's like 70 feet of lot before you even get to the panels. That would, again, make it more economically feasible for those that face west.
And presumably, if somebody wanted to come to us for a variance on this, they could, right? We could grant, or could we not do that if somebody wanted to come to us with a west-facing house? I'm just saying, is this enough of an issue with 30 permits in the last X number of months or years to revisit this, or do this on case-by-case? Would that even be feasible?
So the way our zoning code is written, and I will let Mark take off from this, but the way our zoning code is written is there is only certain variations that can be granted, and this is not one of them. If Mark, you want to continue?
Heather has it right. The other point is that it's the Zoning Board of Appeals that would undertake that consideration, not the Plan Commission.
Yeah, and that's it wouldn't matter to me either way. It would just matter whether or not somebody has that remedy or not as a resident. And what I'm hearing is no. So,
based on the language in the code now, there is not that option.
Okay. Thank you.
Other commissioners, questions or concerns on solar panels?
Yeah, I had a question, and I just remembered this from running around the neighborhoods. So there's a house, for instance, at the corner of, I just pulled it up on my screen because I was trying to remember it, but it's on the corner of Ashland and 48th. And
it's funny you bring this up.
Pardon?
It's funny you bring this up.
Yeah, because I assume those solar panels would be in violation of both the rule as currently drafted and as proposed to be drafted.
So it's so funny funny you bring this up. It really is, because those solar panels were issued before we actually were issued in 2008, before we actually had any requirements in our code for the solar panels. So to be totally honest with you, I'm very unclear how that was issued.
Okay. And so it just kind of allowed the way it is.
They received a permit for it, which means they did get approval for it, so it's now a non-conformity, and they can continue as is, but they cannot expand. So
is that the only example that you're aware of? I just remember it from running around, and I remember seeing it, thinking, that doesn't look like other solar panels.
So the example you saw on the screen was not Ashland, to be clear. It's actually somewhere in Brookfield on my running around route. And that is the only one that we're aware of. I did ask our building official, who clearly goes around town quite often, if there was anything else that came to mind, and he said that was the only one. If folks haven't seen them, once you see them, you'll understand why Dave is so aware of them. They're very large, very large. Just not even from a height standpoint. Like, they're very thick panels. From my understanding, they help with heat the water heater. So like the panel is actually even thicker than just a normal regular residential solar panel. So they're big.
Okay.
Greg, if you don't mind, I do have a comment on solar panels from a resident that I think might be good to read into the record now, if that's all right. Okay. And I apologize, I am going to kind of read verbatim, so if I stumble a little bit, just bear with me. So this is from a resident who actually, the flat roof example that you saw was his home. And so he had kind of put his project on hold while waiting to kind of understand how this would play out. So he said, in my conversations with him from June, that he would like to suggest and support the comments as proposed to this commission. The requirement for that the solar panel may not extend above the peak of the roof to which it is attached makes his ability to put solar panels on his flat roof very challenging and not really economically feasible. So he's in support of it. He also said the height requirement is not clear if that's a cosmetic issue or if there are other environmental concerns, and so he appreciates that there's clarity being put into the code to specify this. Additionally, he himself is a huge proponent of solar, and so he is in support of additional solar panel installation ability to further reduce the carbon footprint of residents and the village. It's especially important for residents because there's a growing demand for electrical needs, and then additionally, encouraging the Grange to be more flexible and progressive on renewable energy policy is a positive in his mind. He then talks about how his ability to take advantage of that flat part of the roof that you saw would allow him to have 20% more efficiency in generating energy for his home. And then additionally, he's indicating that as proposed, the aesthetic appearance to his home really wouldn't be altered that much because of how the panels are attached at that 6 inches as opposed to being stuck straight up. So he thanks the commission for taking a look at this and making it more feasible for residents to have solar energy on their home.
Heather, maybe I'm confused, but he keeps talking about how it would help him increase for the flat part. I thought what we're saying is that wouldn't be allowed.
So again, right now, it's not clear in code that this is allowed. This would not be, but this is basically what he's looking for.
Oh, so the flat part would still not be allowed in the middle.
Yes, the tallest point, where the tallest point is, this would still not be allowed. And I apologize, there's a red X through it that's maybe kind of getting hidden just a little bit. But this would be allowed because it's lower than that top part and it would only be able to extend about 6 inches above it.
I see. Okay, thank you.
And so one question I had, so if you had a house that only had a flat roof, they wouldn't be able to have one on their roof at all? Is that right? Like even, I guess, a sloping roof, right? Like you see some, I don't know that people are building these houses anymore, but I've seen a couple more modern-looking houses go up that almost appear to have like a flat roof. I don't really know if it is or not, but I assume there's some slope for rainwater. But if it was if the whole roof was flat or it had a slight slope, it could only be attached to the roof, but would have to be below the highest point of the roof. Is that right?
So, yeah, in theory, if it was, let's just, for discussion purposes, say like a commercial building, it's just a straight flat roof. You're right. In residential, they wouldn't be allowed to, if that was the only roof they had. However, that's very uncommon here, and even this that you see on the screen, they have multiple heights, they have multiple peaks on the roof, which is more common. So I think the likelihood we're going to run into someone having one flat roof on the entirety of their home is probably going to be very low. For commercial, the commercial requirements are not subject to these same requirements. So commercial can attach them to their building subject to the maximum height requirement.
So one of the ones I'm thinking of, I guess, wouldn't be one of the more modern-looking ones, but I'm thinking there are a handful of these, and I know there's one like on Ashland or like the 300 block of Ashland, kind of the city, kind of 2 or 3 flat style building that does have a flat roof, but then they usually have this like brick border that goes up like 2 feet around, right? I don't know if you're familiar with what I'm kind of referencing, but it's very like extremely common in the city, and I'm wondering if that brick sort of perimeter around a roof like that, is that the highest point of the roof, or is that part of the wall, or how does that get evaluated?
The way that we've written the language of the code, maybe Heather can flip back to that page on the slide, may not extend above the maximum height of the building, which would take into account the parapet wall like you're describing.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
I'm sorry, Charity. So it would or would not impact that?
So if there were a parapet wall, like Dave is describing, that extends above the flat roof, then yes, those panels could be mounted on top of that flat roof behind the parapet wall.
But so long as it's below the parapet wall, I guess, right? Below the top of it.
Right, because the top of the parapet wall would be the maximum height of the building.
Right, okay. That makes sense.
So now, since the parapet is clearly just decorational for a house like that, if you go back to Heather's good example house, the big flat roof on the newer house.
Heather?
I'm sorry, you cut out. You said going back to the example of the new flat house?
The example of the house that you have, that's all roofs.
Can you move the slide? Yep.
There you go. So,
okay, I'm so sorry.
So let's go back to what I originally suggested. If a guy put a decorated rim around, just like the parapet on the brownstone that Dave is referring to, is that possible? Clearly the parapet is not the roof. That is part of the building, I guess. But
right, so
10-inch board rimming this whole flat roof.
They would theoretically, yes. I mean, there are structural considerations, as far as how the roof is actually constructed to add some element around the border. And then there would be the overall height limits for the building based on the code requirements for the residential districts. But if they were to add something that added height to the overall building and change the maximum building height, then they would be able to put solar panels, but they would still only be able to be 6 inches above the roof, to which it's attached.
Which would be fine. Except you're talking about Commissioner Hoppenberg, where the difference of doing the project and not doing the project is 20-foot by 12-foot solar panels. Well, the guy that puts solar panels out there can easily put some kind of trim board elevating the roof as long as it's less than the maximum height. It's all about money.
Yeah, in theory, and then they would still need the 6 inches though. So
yeah, it would be hidden, from sight.
Yep.
Yeah, I still think it would accomplish the aesthetic objective of having them be visible.
So we would see over that.
Greg, are you asking in this specific example if around the red X they had put, you know, a 10-inch sort of parapet style wall up to conceal the essentially the, yeah. I think so. I think it that would accomplish still the objectives of this particular provision of the code.
As long as that didn't exceed the maximum 38 feet.
Exactly, and as long as, you know, met all the load, you know, there's load bearing considerations, all those type of things that would certainly come into play. But for this portion of the code, which I assume is really getting at aesthetics, is I would think that would be okay.
Yeah, for me, it's as if someone comes to you and is going to ask that question. They want to put that much extra up there. The first thing I would think of, well, hey, let's just hide it with, you know, decorative stuff and away we go.
Yep.
Other commissioners?
I agree, that makes sense.
Okay. Would that provision change your language at all as written in the text amendment? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Other comments on solar panels?
This is Susie Mosher. I just have one more question. So this is exclusively for single-family dwellings or accessory buildings, and so I assume that commercial buildings are covered elsewhere? I might have missed that.
So the way that the current code is currently written, and I'm just going to back up, if you would just, you know, kind of ignore what we're proposing. The way it's currently written, single-family homes are the only ones that are subject to these requirements for the reflection, the height, and then the facing the front line. The other districts, it is not. They're not held to the same standards. They will only be held to the standards in their district. So it's still be subject to their district maximum height and things of that nature, but they're not subject to these same restrictions as it is written now, and still would be.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And so in terms of multifamily, you know, does that cover, do these cover any like, you know, I'm not talking about the big apartment buildings, I'm talking about, you know, those 2 or 3 unit buildings like in the typical residential area.
So single family dwelling, we have attached and detached. This does not stipulate either. So this would apply to single family detached and attached. But a traditional multifamily, I think what you're thinking of, like a apartment building, it would not apply to.
Because I know, like, even in my block, like the 400 block of South Madison, right? There's a 3 flat, you know, I don't know if it used to be a house or whatever, but it's at some point now it's like a 3-unit multi-tenant, you know, dwelling, like in the middle of the block, right? And so so this wouldn't apply to that. And so what solar rules would apply to that?
So again, as written now, anything that is not a single-family dwelling is not subject to these standards. So they are only subject to the standards in their district. So that would just be height and setback requirements. They do not have to worry about the requirements under A, B, and C now, and would still not have to.
So I think you're both asking very good questions that we kind of also thought of as we were crafting this amendment, that we really need to go back and do some additional research on what is appropriate and makes sense for regulations for multifamily and commercial and industrial properties as well, where we do have a lot more flat roofs and need to think about, you know, what would be that demand for solar. We haven't really been seeing that yet, but you know, what would be the optimal placement for those kinds of buildings with flat roofs, and then, you know, what might be appropriate regulations for those districts to balance advancing goal of increasing the use of renewable energy and solar power with the aesthetic considerations. So that's something that we'll probably bring to you as a future amendment, because right now there really are, like Heather said, there are no regulations specific to solar. So solar installations are really only subject to the general bulk requirements of those districts right now.
Okay, thank you.
I guess since this is written specifically for single family, it seems that we've run out of too many concerns about it. I'd like to progress and for the future motion put this as is and move on to the next topic. Does anyone have a concern with that? Okay, great. So staff, what's your poison? Porches or air conditioners?
Porches.
Yeah, okay.
Porches, yes. All right, I'm going to take over for Heather for a couple minutes on this one and give her a break. So we want to revisit the definition of porch. In 2018, we added a definition for the first time, and we've had, again, some experience and want to just sharpen that definition and put a fine point on it. The reason that we want to do this really is because in the zoning code, in the comprehensive plan, our documents talk a lot about the desirability of porches and how, as a community, we want to encourage these things. And in the zoning code, there's a lot of deference given to porches, both in design considerations for things like plan developments and other permits and approvals, through the administrative adjustment process, which allows relief specifically for open front porches. Open front porches are excluded from the calculation of floor area ratio, and the first 160 square feet of an open front porch is excluded from lot coverage calculations. So there's a lot of incentive for that the code provides for people to have traditional front porches, like the picture you see. The definition that we have currently for porch is that it's a one-story roof structure attached to the plane of the building with at least one unenclosed side. So, Heather, if you want to move on, we're starting to see applications for some things kind of like this, where they're looking to partially enclose the porch. We also had someone who ran ductwork to a porch, and then after the final inspection was completed, closed in the porch with windows and made it a sunroom. And we didn't really have a way to stop that from we knew that's what she was going to want to do, but we didn't really have a way to stop that from happening in the code as it is. So if you want to go back just one, Heather, to show it open. So this is, nope, next one, nope. One more. Nope, advance one. Advance again. There you go. So that's what we want. We want it open, right? But what our current definition allows is what Heather is going to show now, where you could have it closed in. You could completely wall that off, and that would still meet our definition of porch. So Heather, if you want to go to the language of what we're proposing. What we're proposing as a refinement of that definition is that a porch would be a one-story roof structure attached to the face of the first floor of a building. A porch is unconditioned space, no ductwork run to it, and each exterior vertical plane of a porch, as measured from the floor to the ceiling, is not less than 50% open. This part about each exterior vertical plane being at least 50% open, that's sort of borrowed language from our gazebo definition, and that's worked well for gazebos. So that's what we're proposing, and I'm happy to talk about any questions or comments.
How does it deal with screened-in porches?
What's that?
How does it deal with like the screened-in, with the thick screen? Is that still deemed open? If somebody's got that thick screen meshing on, say, one or two or more of the sides?
So a lot of those screens are removable that we see. We would not want framed-in windows, screen windows, because then people just replace it with a glass window and it's an enclosed space.
So the heavy mesh or the anti-bug screens, how would that be considered? That not be allowed?
If it's something that's seasonal and removable, that would be allowed. We have a lot of people that have those now, that it's a seasonal, they take it in and out. But if it were a framed-in screen window, permanently framed in, that would not be allowed. Because it's just too easy for people to convert them illegally after the fact. And if we've given someone lot coverage for an open porch, we want to ensure that it remains an open porch.
Commissioners?
When the term unconditioned space is used, I take that to mean ductwork, pushing air, whether it's cold or hot air or whatever. Does that apply like to gas lines or anything like that? Like other utilities people, to like a gas fireplace or whatever they might, like the one slide maybe a couple ago that clearly there was a gas line, there's electrical, there was, like cable, there was, everything other than ductwork, right?
Right, right. Obviously, electrical and all of that is fine. There's electrical commonly on a traditional
Right.
form.
Yeah, I guess that was more like the gas line was probably used.
Yeah. That's a
Because
good
the gas line, it's easy to put some other things on that, right? And then all of a sudden you've got gas conditioned space, right?
Right. Really, the terminology for unconditioned is that the space is not climate controlled.
Okay.
So, a fireplace gets a little into the gray area, but it's intended to be climate controlled.
So the slide a couple pictures ago with the fireplace, allowed or not allowed?
My answer to that would be that so long as the other criteria are satisfied, heating through an open fireplace would not be antithetical to that. You still have to have the 50% and openness.
Just put a trellis around it.
Now we're getting punched.
Too soon, Dave. Too soon.
Don't worry, Dave. You can put solar panels on the top of the porch. It'll be fine.
Okay, good.
Unless it faces the front.
Unless it's east or west.
That's a good question.
Right.
This applies to the front or the back, right? Or side, I guess.
No,
Porches.
It would apply to any porch if something's being defined as a porch. But the allowances that are given in the code are toward front porches. So, it's. I still think it's appropriate. If it's a sunroom in the back, whether it's a sunroom or a porch, it's still going to have to meet the setback requirement, the minimum yard requirements. It's going to have to meet right, Heather? Building coverage wouldn't be impacted. It's really just the lot coverage credit, which is provided for front porches. So
We don't allow that on second story?
no, we don't. They are a one-story structure. Yeah, the Board of Trustees had some discussion about that in 2018 when we added the definition, and they felt it was really appropriate. They didn't want to encourage these two-story where there's a sleeping room or something above the porch, because they felt it added a lot of bulk in the front yard. Because again, we give relief through administrative adjustments, lot coverage, and things like that. They felt it was appropriate to keep that limited to a one-story structure.
So I'm always thinking of examples in my head, and I don't want to necessarily get my neighbors in trouble, but so I think there was. I know who used to live here. I don't know who lives here now, so maybe I'm okay. But there's a house that had like a two-story porch, and I think I saw it enclosed, and I wondered, did they have to get a permit for that, or was that just sort of let's just do it and see what happens kind of thing? Or I think it's like on the corner of Spring and Goodman, maybe. Let's see. What is that?
I'm pretty sure the one Dave's talking about is the one Charity was talking about earlier.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Pretty
Yeah, that
positive.
was all screened in, and then it looked like they just basically totally enclosed it with glass and all and everything.
Yeah,
And it was
that's the one I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure.
David originally was a 2-story screen sleeping porch, right? And then it somehow matched. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Right. So that wouldn't be covered by that. Wouldn't be permitted under this at all. In other words, right.
Because once you turn it into a Three Seasons room, it's a sunroom. It's a building addition. It's not a porch.
Right. Okay.
I think, I was here when we redefined the porch last time, and when I look around at the commissioners on the screen, I think 5 of us were part of that plan too. And I think we got tripped up on some of the newer houses when we were trying to define a porch. And when you put up the one that had the wide open porch, and then you drew a cartoon of 2 walls, there you go. We had talked about a lot at last meeting on houses, not necessarily brand new houses, but houses that were more in the 70s and 80s, where the garages are pushed up forward. The porch is back a little, and then on the other side of the porch was probably like a study or a den or a small feature of the house, which would do exactly what this does, encloses the whole porch. And we did debate that quite a bit, as I remember, and we kind of got tripped up on it, I'll be honest. And this seems like this is the same example as we had a few years ago. Commissioner Egan, I believe you were there at the time. Does that sound familiar? You shaking your head? There you go. Dave?
It does. And in fact, I personally have a front porch that has 2 of the walls are completely solid. So I only have 2 open spaces. So I don't think I would meet this requirement with the floor, with it less than 50% open. I don't think. I don't know. It says each exterior vertical plane.
Right. So in your case, Julie, the way we wrote it that way is the actual exterior plane of just the porch would just be that front facing. So in your case, like in your case, pretend, and again, I'm not an artist, I'm sorry, but pretend that this was more representative of your house. The walls that enclose it are actually part of your building.
Correct.
The actual vertical plane of your porch would be the front. So that would mean that the front of your plane being at least 50% open, that would meet this requirement, and it's a 1-story. So that's why we wrote it that way. So it's each vertical plane of the porch itself. The fact that your building happens to wrap around it doesn't make that a plane of the porch. Just the front would make it. If I'm explaining that correctly, clearly.
Right, because the walls on either side of Julie's porch are the walls of the home. So that's the face of the first floor of the house versus the exterior plane of the porch, like the example that Heather has the graphic of, where the porch protrudes from the house. You can't make those completely closed off.
Okay, that seems to make sense then, with that language. I mean, I'm not an architect, but I'm assuming that an architect would understand what that meant.
Commissioner Moser, are you dabbling in the architect?
Makes sense to me.
There you go. Now we got the official word. That's good. Any other discussion?
This is Peter. I like the changes. I think that the spirit of the comprehensive plan it should be adhered to, and I think this kind of closes a loophole. So I'm all in favor of this.
Good deal. If there's no other discussion, I'll write this down as is part of our motion, and let's move on. I believe it's air conditioning time.
Heather?
audio phone versus computer, so I apologize. So you were right. Our last one is mechanical equipment. Charity and I are both going to talk about this one. I'm going to start because I made the diagrams in front of you, which, once again, not an artist, so they are what they are. So what's on the screen currently is what our code currently allows. So right now, on a 50-wide lot, if the home sits directly on their 5-foot setback, or their 7, either way, the mechanical unit, so the air conditioner or the AC unit, cannot be located in the interior side yard. So, as you can see on the screen, blue for right now is your 5-foot interior side yard, and and purple is your 7. So right now, the air conditioning unit couldn't be placed in any of those areas. It could be placed on the side of the home if your house is not wide enough to sit directly on that lot line. So the example you see here. So just to see what this kind of looks like on a larger lot, the larger lots have larger interior setbacks because it's based on the width of the lot. So on a 100-wide lot, it would have two interior setbacks, 10 feet of each. So right now, an air conditioning unit couldn't be located on the side of this home, for example, because the home sits directly on the 10-foot interior side setback. So it's basically a very similar requirement to the 50-foot lot. It keeps it out of the interior side yard. The example that you see here on the 50-wide lot just explains that in our code, when you reach through your 30 feet of the lot, so roughly here, that 5-foot interior side yard setback is reduced to only 3 feet. This is also what you see for most detached garages. Detached garages, when they're located in the rear 30 feet of the lot, do not have to adhere to the interior side setbacks. They only need to meet the 3-foot requirement. So, as proposed, staff is looking to address some of the complaints or some of the concerns we received from certain residents. So, we received a concern from a resident who had moved his air conditioner without a permit into the interior side yard. So, just as an example, if this was his home, he was a 50-wide lot. This is actually a pretty good example. He had actually moved his air conditioning unit into his 5-foot required yard without a permit. So when we addressed this through the permitting process and noting that he had moved the air conditioning unit, he had done some investigative work on his own and was concerned that based on the current requirements, a lot of folks would then be non-compliant. So to look at the air conditioning requirement and also to address some of the differences between wider lots and then our general size lot, staff is proposing to clarify some parts in the existing code, and then also kind of try and address maybe some of the non-conformities that are in the village. So I'm going to flip back just really quick. So again, right now in the code, you have a requirement for your interior side yard, which is a minimum of 5 feet on a 50-wide lot. However, both of your yards together need to add to 12. So that generally means you have a 5 and a 7, as you see depicted on the screen. It could be a 6 and 6, but usually we're seeing a 5 and 7 because a lot of people are using the side of their home with the detached garage or the driveway to the detached garage as their larger setback. So this is generally what you're seeing, is that people are keeping their air conditioning units outside of interior side yards. However, the code requirement for this combined 12 was added much later in the code. So originally, the code required just the 5-foot or 10% of your lot width as your interior side yard. However, it was added later that they then needed to add to 12. So there could be, in theory, some air conditioning units past that time that were installed per permit, per approved, but now are no longer compliant because they maybe need a 7-foot yard. So staff would be proposing to kind of streamline this and just say the air conditioning units cannot be within 5 feet of the interior side yard, within the interior side lot line. And then any units that were installed before January 1st, 2005 would basically have would be a legal nonconformity and could be replaced as is. So, and the kind of the intent behind the 2005 year is because the village actually started using an online permitting system, so our records are far more complete and far more accessible as opposed to our records before that could be, in theory, in microfiche, or maybe do not exist. So that's where I'll leave it. I'll see if Charity wants to add anything. Like I said, we're doing this one together. So
yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit. Like Heather mentioned, the current code requirements have been in place since the code was adopted in 1991. The depth of the required interior side yard was altered after the initial adoption of the code. I will note, too, in response to the residents' concern, we did go back and do a lot of research in our permit history and found that, by and large, the village has enforced our code requirements that have been in place since the 90s in the allowable location of air conditioning units. So we don't believe that there's a lot that are out there that are non-conforming based on the permit review that we have done. However, we did find in our review of neighboring communities that they did provide for replacement, a sort of, grandfathered clause for existing units that didn't meet the current locational requirements. So our recommendation for the proposed amendment is twofold. One is just making it easier for people and just saying it's a 5-foot setback for the air conditioning units off the lot line, period. And so we don't have to deal with a bunch of calculations, which provides some relief for people who have a larger lot. It doesn't have to meet that 10% lot width necessarily. It just needs to be 5 feet off the lot line. And then the second part of the proposed amendment is, as Heather discussed, this grandfather clause that if things existed in 2005, then they can be replaced in their current location, which our nonconformities chapter would not normally allow. Normally, if you remove a nonconformity, you can't put it back. So that's kind of the two pieces. The replacement of the existing nonconforming ones is sort of mirroring language that we found in Western Springs and LaGrange Park.
Quick question. So is the intent of this, the rule generally, is it one of aesthetics? Is it noise control, like for a neighboring house to not hear the noise? Or is it a safety issue, like due to some sort of mechanical problem or something being too close to a neighboring house? Just curious as to what you think that might be.
So there's screening requirements for air conditioning units generally. So I think it's less aesthetic and more about the noise of these mechanical units, mechanical equipment, and being in between the homes, maybe a higher likelihood that noise is bouncing off of the houses. And then also there's logistical considerations that, we do have quite a few homes that are only 5 feet off the lot line. If you have an air conditioning unit that is 3 feet wide and 18 inches from the home, it's right up on the property line. And if there's a neighbor's driveway right up on the property line, which is the case in many locations throughout the city, you could have issues of people hitting it with the car, blowing snow onto it with the snow blower, things like that.
Right. Okay.
Let me agree with Charity, but say that historically, the aesthetics were as important as noise. Things have changed over the period of time, but there was a strong desire to keep the required yard open.
Very good. Okay.
Commissioner Regan?
I have a question about the date, and I understand the idea of the database, and there's more information. How would it affect a property, for example, that currently has the AC unit in a non-conforming location, but it was replaced, let's say, in 2010? So technically, that would not fall there, but you're only replacing a unit that was already there before 2005.
can show that there was an air conditioning unit in that location in 2005, I think our intent was to continue to allow replacement in its current location. But they would have to demonstrate that there was an air conditioning unit in that location on January 1st, 2005.
And what if the village doesn't have any records regarding the property?
Then it would be on the homeowner to have the records. It would just have to comply with the current regulations. We could look at a date, as it's noted in the staff report, we could look at a date that's closer to current. When Western Springs and LaGrange Park adopted the ordinance, they chose the date of the adoption of the ordinance as their date. However, I think there could be equity concerns if we picked the date of the adoption of this amendment, for example, as the allowable replacement date, because we have had people that have built new homes since 1991 that have had to comply with our current regulations. And we also have had people, and Heather can speak to this, that have been required to move their air conditioning units to come into compliance.
The staff report says that you're assuming that it has to be replaced every, 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, according to the U.S. Department of Energy, they say the typical lifespan for an air conditioning unit is 15 to 20 years. So 2005 to 2020, we're right in that time span of needing to be replaced.
I mean, I personally, because I know someone who it will affect, I think that holding someone to 15 years is, that's a pretty harsh effect, in my opinion. Especially when they didn't realize that they had to have proof that it was in existence 15 years ago. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, it felt punitive to me a little bit. I agree with Julie. It's for instance, my house was built in 2006, so I fall right under this, exception, if you will. But that's 1 year. I got lucky, if you will, if we decided to go with 2005. But the way that my house is configured, if I had to move the AC from the side to the back, it would be a big pain in the butt to do it, and it would be. It would cost a lot of money to have to rerun lines and reconfigure how the side of the house is actually constructed in a way almost to allow for the AC to be built on the side. So I think we need to put a little bit more thought into the timeline. I'm not sure that it makes sense to tie it to the life of a standard AC unit as much as it is when houses were constructed based on what the code requirements were. I don't know if that's even feasible.
Sure. So, Jeff, let me speak to that a little bit. The code requirement's been in place since 1991. So any air conditioning unit installed or replaced since 1991 should be in compliance with our current regulations.
So you're just talking about, in Julie's example, for instance, if Julie's house was built before 1991, but would need to have an AC replaced now, she might have to move the unit to a different spot. Am I understanding that correctly?
So, since 1991, air conditioning units have been subject to these current regulations.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that there may be some, I think it's hopefully a smaller percentage based on the permit history and just kind of a windshield survey that we did, that are non-compliant. What we're saying is, technically, for someone to really be, if we wanted to say, okay, if you had your air conditioning unit installed legally, correctly at the time, and we want you to be able to continue to replace it in that location without having to move it, the correct date we should be choosing per the code is 1991. But the likelihood of anyone, the village or the homeowner, having records back to 1991 is slim.
Right.
Which is why we suggested 2005, because at least there's more likelihood the village would have record at that point.
And is there any option to apply for a variance from this provision? use my own house. My air conditioning unit is in my front yard because my front yard is on 47th Street.
I don't think there is one of the variations listed that would apply here, but I can't say that with certainty. There may be. It would be typical, just to look at this in a different way, that if these are not conforming, and thus safe, and typically what would happen if there was going to be a date set after which they have to be compliant, that date would be a date of a relatively significant period of time during which all of them would be amortized at least 15 years, and they would they should definitely have a permit to be able to show that it was properly and legally installed. So there are ways to jump on that, and we can talk about it and work through it. But
just add to what Mark said in response to Julie's question. Setbacks are a permitted variation application. So someone could seek a variation from the minimum required setback for an air conditioning unit.
Okay, good. It's not a setback, though. It's a required yard, right?
Right. It's an exemption to a required yard. Yeah. In Article 3.
Yeah.
Other questions? Is there anyone who's looking to change the dates? Feel strongly?
So really quick, Charity mentioned that we had a little bit more data, and I do have 2 comments from some residents as well. Just from a permitting standpoint, so an actual application of the code, since at least I've been here, because of the way the code is currently written, we have, in fact, in the past 4 years, made 4 people move their air conditioning units because we did not have any record of them being there, and additionally, they weren't in permitted locations. So we've required people to move them. Generally, how you move them, there's kind of 2 extremes. One, you can redo the configurations inside your home, very costly. 2, you can insulate your lines, and then basically you're digging a small trench, you're insulating your lines, and you're running them to your new approved location. So we have mostly seen that second option, where people are insulating them and running them. I can tell you, we did take a look at someone who had concerns, who had raised some of the concerns related to their home, and to have moved them without a permit, that was actually their method. They did not move the interior connections. They simply insulated the pipe and ran it around the corner to their new air conditioning location. Also, to kind of address, as you mentioned in the staff report, things may have been moved without permit. We did go out and surveyed a number of blocks across the village, both north and south of 47th Street and then east and west of Grange Road. We surveyed about just under 170 lots, just a walk-up inspection. About a third of them, we couldn't really see what was happening in the side yard. There was a fence or bushes or trees. So the remaining 120, after looking at them, some of them were in the interior side yard, but did not appear to be within the required yard. So they were this example here, where they were outside of their required yard, but next to the home. And then we found some that we could not see either side of the home, which means it would likely be located in the rear. And then we did find some that were located in the interior side yard that may at least violate the 7 feet. We couldn't verify just from a visual inspection if they were violating the 5 foot. But what we found were the numbers just from that field research, it matched very similarly to the numbers that you found in the staff report. So basically, about 80% of them were in compliance with code, and then there was just about, so 88% were in compliance, and then about 12% we couldn't confirm for sure, but may not be in compliance. So we're finding similar numbers, that the way that we've required people to address their air conditioning through permitting and what's actually out in the ground is pretty similar. So going back to Sherry's point, these things are supposed to have been in place since 91, but we're finding, and we found for the most part they are where they're supposed to be, but there are some examples like New Egan that are in other locations. So just to put a little data behind that for you. And then I do have 2 comments from residents if you guys want me to read those in now, or if there's more comments or questions.
Go ahead now.
Okay. So my first one is from the resident at 28 North Spring. His name is John Janowski. He said, aesthetically, it makes more sense in many cases to mount AC units on the side. On his street, 70% are side mounted. There is no way this in no way deters from the beautiful neighborhood that we have here. Just to drive down our street and look, the newer AC units are significantly smaller and easily hidden with bushes or a fence being located there. In many cases, this dead space can be upcycled to cover the necessary mechanical equipment location. The new design models have been engineered with this position in mind also. He would further like to mention noise. The noise of an AC unit in 2020 is completely different than older models. Technology has greatly evolved. His neighbors and he prefer not to see or hear them, especially when they share a backyard space with their kids running in between them. If the neighbor is a concern, an easy resolution would be to have them sign friendly waivers. LaGrange neighbors have great relationships and they should be allowed to work together if they choose. In his case, especially the side mounting keeps his younger kids away and not playing around them or on them. They have a small backyard shared with neighbors. So many neighbors near downtown LaGrange and kids, especially younger, like to play. Children's safety is absolutely, I think this is to be considered, I think, in these decisions where board leadership can decide. In many homes, it is the best option to side mount. LaGrange homes have footprints and actual lots that are not standard. They vary widely. He would like to broaden and to be able to make spot decisions in future locations as LaGrange homes are unique. What makes LaGrange such an incredible town is the diversity in homes. There are we have old historic through new model builds that need to be more complex and engage leadership in decision making case by case. If we are a cookie cutter community, these roles would be easy, but we definitely are not, and that's what makes sense to us and are diverse and ultimately desirable. And I have one more from the resident at 30 North Spring. So this is actually this other person's neighbor. His name is Ravi Ramara. He shares John's sentiment, and as we discussed in 2020, he thinks that the key, and as John mentioned, for our community leadership is to be engaged and willing to change prior and potentially out-of-date ordinances as times and technology change. Clearly, his primary concern is safety to his house and surrounding neighborhood, but secondly, he wishes to live in a neighborhood that allows LaGrange residents to maximize lot space for more logical planning to enjoy outdoor time with their loved ones and neighbors.
Okay, well that's obviously the opposing viewpoint to what we propose here. I mean, some of the comments are valid, especially the fact that these things are smaller and more quiet. But I still think we need a uniform rule on how we place these. And I don't believe we can place these anywhere, and then hope that they're shielded by bushes or whatever mechanicals. So that personally, I'm in favor of keeping it as proposed. I'm not so sure about the date as brought up by Commissioner Egan or Commissioner Hoffenberg, but stand on this. Anyone else?
This is Susie Mosier. I appreciate those emails. I think that it's great to hear from the residents in their specific instances. I don't think that everybody is as lucky to have neighbors that they always get along with, and I think we need to think where we have to put in some regulations. We can't just assume everybody's going to work it out, with their neighbors. That's one thing that popped into my head. Also, I think, air conditioning units, I agree, they are getting more efficient and improving by the day. I think we need to remember that it's AC units or generators, and with so many people having individual generators, I have one. It's properly located though. They're so noisy, and they have to cycle through once a week for their ongoing maintenance, and AC units are quiet compared to these generators and their ongoing maintenance. So it's nice to hear people's opinions and things, but I agree with Commissioner Pace that we need to put in, we need to have regulations, and we need to set these standards.
I agree. The generator point is a good one.
Other commissioners? Does anyone else feel either way about the date, or should we keep it the way staff wants?
I have a suggestion that, perhaps we could include something about grandfathering in the non-conformities, because, unfortunately not everyone in LaGrange has a lot that's 50 feet wide or 100 foot wide. And their house is configured differently on the lot. There are a fair amount of those. Obviously, it's not the majority, but perhaps if the original plans, when the house was or when the AC was installed, or when the house was rehabbed, if the village permitted them to put the AC unit in that location, that they're grandfathered in, and I guess again that would raise the problem of having to prove that was the case, but hopefully the village would have the record so that those homeowners wouldn't be forced to move, an AC unit all the way around their house to the other side. That would be one suggestion. And I do think the 2005, I get it with the database. I think that's too far. In the past, I think it should be, at most 2010. That's my opinion.
And Julie, one thing that Julie brought up, Commissioner Egan, brought up and Heather and Charity, you were both bringing this example up about somebody that can remove it and trench it, but you have somebody that doesn't really have the ability to trench because there's paved area that they have to deal with. Are you asking somebody at that point they don't have an option. At that point, they got to move it inside internally, so I like Mr. Egan's suggestion about some type of a non-conforming exception to allow for the hardship circumstance. I guess that's also why, Mark, I was asking earlier about the whole variance component, because if somebody was able to prove they have a hardship, if you literally are saying you have to move this AC unit and all of a sudden they're saying, yeah, but that's going to cost me $5,000, I think that's really unfair to put that onus on a homeowner. I don't know if that's even possible or not, but I do like the non-conforming, option if we can, somehow figure out an efficient way to draft that in.
I just want to clarify the non-conforming piece, and then allow you to continue your debate about what the appropriate date for this grandfather clause might be. Anything that was installed not in compliance with our current regulations, with the exception of this 5 to 7 feet, that 2 foot, but we're taking care of that by if we go with the 5 feet, we're taking care of that. We're putting it back to what it was in 1991. So anything that's within 5 feet of the interior lot line that's been installed since 1991 was either 1, done so illegally, or 2, through a permit that was somehow issued in error. That's really So for something to be non-conforming, it has to have been legally permitted at the time that it was constructed in compliance with the regulations in place at the time. So that's the challenge with this, because it is an older regulation. So what we're doing, if we're setting any date that's later than 1991, we are deeming these things as non-conforming, although they may have been installed not in compliance with the regulations at the time. So just to keep that in mind.
Did you say Western Springs used a date that was essentially the date that this amendment was, that this similar amendment was adopted?
Yeah, so Heather, maybe you can speak to that since you did the surrounding community research.
Yeah, absolutely. So Western Springs had adopted their changes in 2012, and so they used January 1 of 2012. The Grange Park also has a similar clause, and when they made changes originally to the code in 2010, they used January 1 of 2010. So the neighbors used the date of the adoption for the code. So in theory, just hypothetically, if we were proposing that, it would be, January 1 of 2021, or whatever date the ordinance would be enacted.
And would something like that for this amendment give anybody real heartburn?
Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I want to make sure I understand what we're talking about here, because we're saying you can't be closer than 5 feet to the lot line, except that anything that exists as of some date is deemed legal conforming. So the closer we come to today, the worse it is for anybody that has something that's what I'll call non-conforming. The farther out we go, the more people you're going to include that are closer than 5 feet to the property line. Am I reading that right?
I'm not sure I followed you. I'm sorry.
It's the way the proposed amendment says, in no event closer than 5 feet to any lot line, except any mechanical equipment existing as of January 1, 2005 that does not meet the locational requirements is considered legal conforming and may be replaced in its current location. So if we say January 1st, like let's take Julie, your example, because I think I was looking at that same way and wrong, but if we move that forward to like January 1st, 2000, I think that's actually worse. Reduces the number of people that get to take advantage of what I'll deem the legal non-conforming. If we expand that date out further in the past, we're bringing in more people that wouldn't be forced to have this heartache and move. But Charity, I understand what you're saying in the sense that nobody should really fall under this if they would have followed the code and the permitting requirements. I get that. And the only, arguably, the only people that this should affect, arguably, are either people that have different, lot lines like it sounds like Julie might have, but again, I would assume that Julie's circumstance where her front is facing 47th would still be permitted under a different circumstance based on technically where the front lot, and I guess we can have that discussion separately, but the only circumstances would really affect would be people that either did it outside of code or people who have the magical 40-year-old units who, would have to replace that unit that, still is running from, 1985. So,
or those who were granted a permit was an error, as Charity said, which
right.
I think is to revoke a permit that was already granted.
Yeah. But Jeff, I think I understand what you're saying, but I think the language as written, so it says, except any mechanical equipment existing as of, so let's say we use January 1st, 2021. So if something doesn't conform as of January 21, does not meet the requirements, it is considered legal conforming and may be replaced in its current location. So if it's there now, it's legal conforming. So I think bringing the date forward helps people that already have that would otherwise be in violation of this. The way I read it. I think that's the intent, is what of the language, right? Anybody, if on January 2nd, 2005, you had a problem, then you wouldn't. Then it wasn't existing at that time, and you wouldn't be legal conforming.
Right.
Right. But if you were December 31st, 2004, then you just fit right in. You're okay. So I think bringing the date forward helps people who have a current non-conformity with this as amended language. There might be a triple negative in there, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I hear what you're saying, Dave. So maybe the better way to say that, instead of saying existing as of, we use the words like prior to. Because again, I think I'm getting tripped up on the existing as of. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm reading that backwards. I think that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's what happened there. But I understood what you were getting at. But I think, maybe there's a different way to tweak it. But I think if you had a unit as of in existence as of January 1st of some date, then you're okay. I read in a very simple layman's terms.
Right.
If it existed as of January 1st of some date, you're okay. And I think moving that date to a current date would help anybody that has a current non-conformance with this provision. Right, Charity? Yeah.
Yes, Dave, you're understanding it correctly. Yes,
okay.
So if it helps to read it as existing prior to rather than existing as of,
I'm fine with either of those. So if that helps.
Which, to Charity's point earlier, I think I lean to doing that because I think you always want to try to avoid the penalizing people for anything that exists prior to the date in which you enact an amendment, right? For the lawyers on the phone, that's always a no-no. That being said, if you just told us that you've done this now for 4 people in recent past, that's a little bit of an inequitable result for those 4 people. So I'm not really sure how to rectify it.
And Charity or anybody else we're kind of squabbling over that language, but does anybody have an issue with using the more current date, the 2021, going with kind of the Western Springs and Grange Park approach of?
So if I could just have Heather clarify briefly, when Western Springs and Grange Park enacted their amendments, were their new requirements more restrictive than their old requirements? Because the changes that we're proposing are relaxing our current requirements.
So they were restricting them, but they were restricting them. But from my understanding of just having a conversation with the permitting folks over there, there was some relaxation, some additional restriction, but then there was some concern that some of them were existing and maybe put it without permit. So I think it's a mixture of both, at least for the LaGrange one that I can speak to.
Typically, what you see in zoning codes, and Mark can speak to this too, is when you enact a new ordinance, an amendment that's making it more restrictive and you're creating a bunch of nonconformities, that's where you would have this language that, okay, if these things existed as of this day, we're going to let you continue to have them and replace them because we've made it more restrictive. We took your totally legal thing that you had and made it non-conforming. That's a little bit different than what we're doing here because we're actually relaxing the requirements. The Plan Commission is welcome to recommend whatever date you feel is appropriate to the board. But I just want to make sure that point is clear so that you understand the distinction because, as Commissioner Hoffenberg was saying, we have required other people to comply both with replacements of units and with new construction homes and where they locate.
Right. Yeah, I think I see that. I totally understand that. I just, I felt like we were getting hung up on the date, so I just didn't know if, instead of punting it to a later time, or to a later meeting, if 2021, because otherwise, I don't know, 2005, I don't know, that rationale can be explained easily or not, but certainly January 2021 can be easily explained, but that was my only thinking, So
let me get this right. If you push it all the way to 2021, and then everyone who got anything installed before gets its grandfathered in, does that just mean everyone could just replace the air conditioning where it currently is, except for new construction? So it all stays the same.
Right. Yep.
Okay. What are we thinking?
I think that's preferable. I just think it's a little punitive to start making people. While I understand the arguments to the flip side, I think that's my personal.
Others? Commissioner Egan, I see your speaker on.
Yeah, so as I was going to say, obviously it doesn't solve that problem of people who installed their AC units in a non-conforming location without a permit. So perhaps, and this is making it way too burdensome, I know, I don't know how to fix that, but if they have a current non-conforming location that was properly installed by a permit, even if the permit was issued in error, that's not the homeowner's fault, that should be grandfathered in. So they can see the burden, I guess, on the homeowner to show that it was properly located at the time that they received the permit. But I still do think that putting a date on it is unduly punitive. So I would go with the 2021, in my opinion.
I agree with Commissioner Egan. I think that they shouldn't get off scot-free if they didn't do it the right way. But I'm okay with it.
So to change it to the dates when enacted, is that the idea?
Correct.
So can I just get a clarification on the consensus here? So in the language, it would be to change it to whatever the effective date of this amendment is, so let's say February 2021, for the sake of argument. And then would we be changing it from just existing as of that date or properly permitted prior to that date?
I'm suggesting, I think Commissioner Egan is too, that it's for properly permitted applications.
Right.
Well, does properly permitted not bring in the mistaken permit?
Okay, so yes, permitted with a valid building permit. However, I believe that number will be less than how we have it drafted currently. You will be providing less relief to total number of people than how it's drafted currently. Because the number of people that we have issued a permit to in error would be the only people that could replace their unit in its current location.
Right.
Does that presume that the village has records to address someone who had something installed 15 or 20 years ago as to whether they have a permit?
Right, we would have to have a record of a permit that not only was an air conditioning unit installed, but installed in that location.
Mm-hmm. And whose responsibility is it to produce that permit?
Ultimately, it's the homeowner's responsibility to prove that they have a right to that exemption. Obviously, the village would assist with that, but it's unlikely that we will have records of the location of an air conditioning unit installed in the 90s.
So let's take the flip side of that then. How would you prove, as currently drafted, utilizing let's use the arbitrary January 1, 2005, how would somebody prove that also?
So it may be more likely that it is the current unit that's in place now because it's still the lifespan of a unit. We have better records of actual scanned documents that increases the likelihood that we would have a site plan showing where the AC unit was installed at from 2005 forward. And then we may be able to use aerial photography or street view in some locations to help document that. It's possible, but again, 2005 is going to be rough to find good records. But as we move forward from that date, the records keep getting better and better.
flip side of that is, and I'm sympathetic to, should we as a plan commission and we as a village really have sympathy to somebody that did something quote unquote illegally? That being said, let's just pick a date. Let's say 2005, let's say 2010. And I don't know if Heather or Charity, if you have the statistics on this, but how many people in this village live in their homes or have lived in their homes for more than, let's call it 10 years, right? And if the number of people that have lived in their home for less than 10 or 15 years, meaning, to use a legal term of art, they're a bona fide purchaser, right? They bought their house really, perhaps, unless they had an inspector that realized that the AC was not properly installed in the right location. They bought their house with an AC that was in a spot, and they had no idea that it was in the right spot or the wrong spot. And I just want to avoid penalizing too many people in that regard by picking a date or talking about properly or not or permitting as a standard, because you have there's a real potential of harming a significant number of people monetarily here by saying anybody that's got an AC unit that wasn't permitted in the right way has got to move it if and when they want to replace it. And I don't know what those numbers are or not, but if you tie this to permitting, do have the potential of harming residents that had no idea that their AC was in the wrong place.
I don't have those numbers in front of me right now, our census numbers that show household tenure and how long people have lived in the community. That was something that we discussed as we were looking at, with 1991 being the date that it quote unquote should be, that was another factor as to why we didn't like using that date, because it was even more unlikely that that person owns the home in 1999. Not because,
Come here, please. No, right now.
Not out of a concern about fairness or anything like that, but just record keeping. That it would have made it even more unlikely that there would be records.
On the flip side, I would hate to give a free pass to newer homeowners who had a bona fide purchase, as opposed to a long-term homeowner in Grange who has been invested in the village for 20, 30 years. And they're the ones who would have to get financial hardship.
If you took out the permitting requirement, wouldn't those people still be protected if you just tied it to a date moving forward?
Well, if you put the properly permitted wording in there, you still got trouble.
No, I agree. That's what I'm saying. So if you just said 2021 and didn't necessarily tie it to properly permitting, this is just a forward-looking enforcement, code as opposed to retroactive.
Very much like that would be to say, absent all the other changes, why don't we just say, if you have to replace it, you got to move it to be in conformance, period.
Which means everybody's affected, and everybody's going to have to move them that's out of code right now.
Right, which is what the code requirement is now.
Right. No, right.
But not everybody's going to have to do that this year.
Does the village make people do that currently? If
Yes.
you have to replace a unit, and is it required does that happen?
Yeah, Heather said she's had 4 in the time that she's worked here.
Okay.
And we don't know from prior professionals that worked here. Heather's predecessor. Our permit records don't show we don't keep the not approved plans. so I can't confirm for sure, but based on the records, by and large, the permitting records showed that the approved locations met code. So we have no reason to believe that Heather's predecessor didn't also make people move their units. We also do about 10 new single-family homes a year, and they have to comply.
I'm not sure I see a unified decision on this right now.
I agree. Maybe, it's almost 10 o'clock. Maybe we punt this part of it and look at the rest. Just a suggestion.
This is actually our last one for tonight. So do you mean punt to a different meeting, or?
Just this one issue, yeah. But I don't have any further thoughts.
That's fine. We can bring it back if you want time to digest all of the discussion. If there's any further data points that you want us to bring to bear, we can. We can look at that census data. In our codes, it does say when you purchase a property, you inherit the violations. So that's something to consider as well. But we're happy to bring this back or to continue this evening, whatever is your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, maybe if there's some data points on what Commissioner Hoffenberg was talking about, just get a sense for how many people we're going to that are going to be affected by this. The last thing I want to be involved in is creating financial hardship for people when there could be another solution.
I'd also be curious as to the applications that Heather has received where they were forced to move them, what the circumstances were regarding where they were originally located and then had to move them.
And when were they originally installed? Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And then from a 30,000 foot, I don't know if this is even possible. Do you know how many total single family homes are in the Grange as compared to constructed since 1991? I mean, that might be getting too into the weeds, but I'd just be curious the big numbers we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, I can get you estimates of that.
Okay. Is there a way, and maybe this is a question for Mark, is there a way to bifurcate that one and vote on all of the other text amendments that it seems like we have a consensus on? Split this one out?
The piece of cake, sure. All you have to do is say a motion to recommend approval of all of the, we have the one that we've already done, but all of the proposed amendments except for, and then state the section that would go into. What section is it, Charity?
3110G5, mechanical.
Yeah, 3110G5. So the motion, if you're so inclined to make one, would be to recommend approval to the Board of Trustees of all proposed amendments to the code except the proposal related to subsection 3110G.
So moved.
Second.
You are allowed.
That was Dave Schwartz, by the way.
Can you lower it?
Okay, thank you.
And the second was Peter O'Connor, I believe.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who motioned the first?
Dave Schwartz.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, we would go to a roll call vote.
Yes.
Schwartz?
Aye.
O'Connor?
Aye.
Egan?
Aye.
Hoffenberg?
Aye.
Mosier?
Aye.
Wentink?
Aye.
And Pace.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Well, that was the last issue on the agenda. Any general discussion topics right now? Hearing none. There's no public comments, I assume, Heather? Any other public comments come in?
No other comments. The three I already read into the record were the only ones I received.
Okay, great. Then can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
My family's about ready to kill me, so I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Again, we need names.
Dave Schwartz.
David Schwartz.
Thanks. I know who it is.
Motion second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Roll call vote, please, for adjournment.
Thank you. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mosier,
Aye.
Egan,
Aye.
Hoffenberg,
Aye.
O'Connor,
Aye.
Wentink,
Aye.
and Pace.
Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.